side note, I'm filming a lot of these on the same day, so I'm not Superman and have like a dozen of these outfits. So just so you know, throwing that out there. Okay? Now, review of our last lesson. Keep in mind, again, a change in price will not change demand. A change in price changes quantity demanded. And so the focus of today's lesson is going to look at the 5 things that will in fact change demand. 5 things, or we call it determinants. The 5 determinants of demand are what changes demand. If we're not talking one of these 5 determinants, demand does not change. If we're talking a change in price, again, demand will not change. Only the determinants of demand. And I highly recommend that you have out your note packet along with this particular lecture. Okay? I also recommend some scratch paper and to replicate what I'm going to produce on the board. Okay? Highly recommended. If you have questions, and you undoubtedly will, please post them or come see me before school or after school. All right? We will have an activity on this very idea. Okay? On with the determinants. Okay? There are 5 determinants of demand. A change in population, a preference change, change in the price of a substitute, a change in the price of complements, and I've got one other one, and an income change. Got to keep my notes as well. So those are the 5 determinants of demand, the 5 things that will change demand. I didn't mention before, and allow me to do this now, and if you don't understand complements and substitutes and diminishing marginal utility, please go back to that section in the slide. Make sure you understand that before you continue with this lecture. Ready? Okay. Now, determinants of demand. Let's look at a change in population. And so, you look at overall population figures, and this should seem obvious enough. If the population increases, then so will demand. All right, so if the population of Clarkston, say, goes from 35,000 to 70,000, then the demand for seats at the Union for mac and cheese will increase because there's just more people. Okay? And so what does an increase look like? And you see here I have our original demand curve D1. If this is our original demand curve for mac and cheese at Rudy's, and then all of a sudden there's a huge influx of people that move into Clarkston for whatever reason. They say, hey, this is a great place to live, and now we go from 35,000 to 70,000. The demand for mac and cheese at Rudy's and at the Union will increase from this original demand curve, will increase over to this new demand curve called D2. Okay? And allow me to say this. An increase, this is easier to understand with demand, but when we get to the supply, it becomes a little bit more difficult. An increase will always be a shift to the right. A decrease will always be a shift to the left. All right? And so a change in population, increase in population, is going to increase demand. So you see we shifted from the right, from the original demand curve D1 to this new demand curve D2. Okay? Now, the inverse can also be true. All right? Let's say that the economy around here in Clarkston isn't doing so well and everybody leaves here. Everyone moves. We go from 35,000 down to 20,000. Well, then the demand for mac and cheese would decrease from D2 over to D1. Okay? Or if this is if it becomes if it's easier for you to understand, then we can just have a completely new demand curve. If this is our original, all right, then we're talking possibly even D3 here being a decrease. Okay? And so a change in population will change demand. Next, let's just go right in order, and change in income. An income change will change demand. Let's say that you start a new job, entry level. You're making $40,000 a year, all right out of college, and you're feeling pretty good about yourself, but then you realize, okay, $40,000 doesn't necessarily go as far as I thought it did. And so, you're living the apartment lifestyle, you're still rocking some ramen and some Easy Mac. Okay? Then all of a sudden, your boss realizes, hey, you're a pretty darn good worker. I'm going to give you a raise. In fact, I'm going to double your salary. So you go from 40 to 80. Okay, now you're feeling pretty good about yourself. All right? And so what that does is it will increase demand for more expensive foods or whatever. Okay, so that change in income for you will increase your demand for other products, more luxurious products, if you will. Okay? And so the shifts are going to look the same. All right? An increase in income, demand curve will shift from D1 to D2. At the same time, and this is probably the one that hits closer to home for many of you, over the past 5 or 6 years, I'm sure many of your parents' salaries have not gone up, but they have gone down. So a decrease in income will decrease demand. All right? You go from, Angus beef down to peanut butter for sandwiches. All right? So you're having Angus burgers a couple years ago. Your parents have the salary cut in income, and now you're talking peanut butter. So your demand for Angus beef will have decreased. So we look at this. Okay? Original demand curve. Your parents take the hit at work, not making as much money, so they shift down to D3. Okay? Or I should say to the left. Shift to the left over to D3. Change in preference. The example I used for this the other day in class, although I didn't speak to it specifically for demand, change in preference would be something like a technology change. So like a Garmin or a TomTom. How 3 or 4 years ago, they were all the rage. Hey, plug this into your car and it'll tell you exactly where you need to go. Well, now the demand for TomToms and Garmins have decreased because your iPhone can do the same exact thing. And so why buy more electronics when your iPhone or iPod or whatever can do everything for you? Okay? And so let's take a look at this. If this is your original demand curve for a Garmin or a TomTom, now instead of buying one of those, your preferences have changed from a Garmin or a TomTom because you want to have an all-in-one as opposed to having a cell phone, a GPS device, an MP3 player, so on and so forth. You want one device that can do all of it, and so your preference has changed, and so demand, the demand for a Garmin or a TomTom or a GPS system has gone from D1 down to this blue one, D3. Okay? Or on the flip side, a couple of years ago, maybe you're saying, well, the iPhone isn't all that great, yada, yada, yada. There still needs to make improvements to it. It's not as good as I once thought. And maybe a lot of people are thinking this. But now with the iPad, or the iPhone rather 2, the iPhone 3, or whatever generation is out right now, okay? And so now maybe you're saying, you know what, I don't want the BlackBerry. Maybe I want this one over here. Because of a change in preference. Because maybe the iPhone can do everything the BlackBerry can do, and then some. And so then you shift from D1 to D2. Notice, again, price had nothing to do with it. It all had to do with preference change, or a change in income, or a population change. Okay? Now, the last two is where it gets confusing. And this is where, if you didn't stop before and review complements and substitutes, go back now and review those. You must understand complements and substitutes before you continue. Ready? Okay. A change in the price of a substitute. So, I mentioned about like peanut butter and Angus beef before. Let's go with the one I use more frequently, and that's sliced deli chicken and peanut butter. Okay? Those two items are substitutes for each other. Why are they substitutes? Because they're both lunch items that go on a piece of bread to make a sandwich. They both are nourishing. They both provide protein. They both have similarities in that sense. They're both being made for a sandwich, therefore they can be substitutes for one another. Okay? Now, let's say that there's an outbreak of avian flu or whatever, bird flu, whatever the one that kills chickens. And the quantity of chickens decreases. If the quantity of chicken decreases, then suppliers are going to be forced to raise their price. The price of chicken skyrockets. If the price of chicken goes way up, then people are going to say, well, it's not that I demand less chicken, I just can't afford it. And so I'm going to purchase less. My quantity demand for chicken has gone down. But while the quantity demanded for chicken has gone down, the overall demand for peanut butter will go up. So let's take a look at this. All right? So if this demand curve represents demand for peanut butter, and the price of chicken goes up, then overall demand for peanut butter will increase, shift to the right. Okay? Let me say that again. If price of chicken goes up, the demand for peanut butter will also go up, will increase. Okay? This is one of the most difficult things to understand here. All right? The price of chicken has no impact on the demand for chicken. It impacts the quantity demand. People will demand, the quantity demanded of chicken will decrease. But that decrease, people still have to eat lunch, will cause a shift in demand for peanut butter. All right? And the opposite is also true. If we talk about peanut butter and there's some sort of frost or something, late frost in Georgia, and destroys the peanut crop, and so the price of peanut butter skyrockets, well, then the demand for chicken will increase. Okay? So I want to make sure that's perfectly understood. And on the flip side, if the price of chicken plummets, if the price of chicken goes down, then demand for peanut butter will decrease. Okay? So that's a change in the price of a substitute. Now, last one, the last determinant. Okay, the fifth determinant is change in the price of a complement. Okay, so let's stick with peanut butter. All right, the classic complement to peanut butter is jelly. So if the price of jelly, the fluctuation in the price of jelly will cause an increase or a decrease in demand for peanut butter. Okay, so if the price of jelly goes up, stay with me now, if the price of jelly goes up, quantity demanded for jelly will decrease, and now people, since peanut butter goes with jelly and they're buying less jelly, guess what? They're going to want less peanut butter. So that decrease in quantity demanded for jelly will result in a decrease in demand for peanut butter. That change in price of jelly changes demand for peanut butter. And the flip is also true. A change in price of peanut butter will change the demand for jelly. That's a change in the price of a complementary good. Okay? And the beauty of this, I know I went through this a little bit quick. The beauty of this format is you can go back and watch again and again. I highly recommend, this was about a 10-minute lecture, I highly recommend that you go back and you watch this one 2 or 3 times. As the bell rings, I'm about to have students come in. Actually, you guys are coming in. Okay? Watch this one 2, 3, 4 times. You must understand the determinants of demand and how that causes the demand curve to shift.